most latitudes. I don't suppose we could find a better man for our purpose, do you?" "No. He was a sponge fisher once, I believe." "Did he tell you so?" "No. But yesterday, when you took the boat and cruised to the south, I sat writing here and keeping up the fire, and I saw Gru climbing about among the mangroves over the water in a most uncanny way, and two snake-birds sat watching him, and they never moved. He didn't seem to see them. His back was toward them. And then, all at once, he leaped backward at them where they sat on the mangrove, and he got one of them by the neck." "What?" The girl nodded. "By the neck," she repeated, "and down they went into the water. And what do you suppose happened?" "I can't imagine," said I with a grimace. "Well, Gru went under, still clutching the squirming, flapping bird, and he stayed under." "Stayed under the water?" "Yes, longer than any sponge diver I ever heard of. And I was becoming frightened when the bloody bubbles and feathers began to come up." "What was he doing under the water?" "He must have been tearing the bird to pieces. Oh, it was quite unpleasant, I assure you, Mr. Smith. And when he came up and looked at me out of those very vitreous eyes, he resembled something horridly amphibious. And I felt rather sick and dizzy." "He's got to stop that sort of thing," I said angrily. "Snake-birds are harmless, and I won't have him killing them in that barbarous fashion. I've warned him already to let birds alone. I don't know how he catches them or why he kills them, but he seems to have a mania for doing it." I was interrupted by Gru's soft and rather pleasant voice from the water's edge, announcing a sail on the horizon. He did not turn when speaking. The next moment I made out the sail and focused my glasses on it. "It's Professor Kemper," I announced presently. "I'm so glad," remarked Evelyn Gray. I don't know why it should have suddenly occurred to me, apropos of nothing, that Billy Kemper was unusually handsome. Or why I should have turned and looked at the pretty waitress, except that she was, perhaps, worth gazing upon from a purely non-scientific point of view. In fact, to a man not entirely absorbed in scientific research, and not passionately and irrevocably wedded to his profession, her violet blue eyes and rather sweet mouth might have proved disturbing. As I was thinking about this, she looked up at me and smiled. "It's a good thing," I thought to myself, "that I am irrevocably wedded to my profession." And I gazed fixedly across the Atlantic Ocean. There was scarcely sufficient breeze of a steady character to bring Kemper to Stingray Key, but he got out his sweeps when I hailed him and came in at a lively clip, anchoring alongside of our boat and leaping ashore with that unnecessary dash and abandon which women find pleasing. Glancing sideways at my waitress through my spectacles, I found her looking into a small hand mirror and patting her hair with one slim and sun-tanned hand. When Professor Kemper landed on the coral, he shot a curious look at Gru, and then came striding across the reef to me. "Hello, Smithy," he said, holding out his hand. "Here I am, you see. Now, what's up?" Just then Evelyn Gray got up from her seat beside the fire, and Kemper turned and gazed at her with every symptom of unfeigned approbation. I introduced him. Evelyn Gray seemed a trifle indifferent. A good-looking man doesn't last long with a clever woman. I smiled to myself, polishing my spectacles gleefully. Yet I had no idea why I was smiling. We three people turned and walked toward the comb of the reef. A solitary palm represented the island's vegetation, except, of course, for the water-growing mangroves. I asked Miss Gray to precede us and wait for us under the palm, and she went forward in that light-footed way of hers, which, to any non-scientific man, might have been a trifle disturbing. It had no effect upon me. Besides, I was looking at Gru, who had gone to the fire and was evidently preparing to fry our evening meal of fish and rice. I didn't like to have him cook, but I wasn't going to do it myself, and my pretty waitress didn't know how to cook anything more complicated than beans. We had no beans. Kemper said to me, "Why on earth did you bring a waitress?" "Not to wait on table," I replied, amused. "I'll explain her later. Meanwhile, I merely want to say that you need not remain with this expedition if you don't want to. It's optional with you." "That's a funny thing to say." "No, not funny. Sad. The truth is that if I fail, I'll be driven into obscurity by the ridicule of my brother scientists the world over. I had to tell them at the Bronx what I was going after. Every man connected with the society attempted to dissuade me, saying that the whole thing was absurd and that my reputation would suffer if I engaged in such a ridiculous quest. So when you hear what that girl and I are after out here in the semi-tropics, and when you're in possession of the only evidence I have to justify my credulity, if you want to go home, go, because I don't wish to risk your reputation as a scientist unless you choose to risk it yourself." He regarded me curiously. Then his eyes strayed toward the palm tree, which Evelyn Gray was now approaching. "All right," he said briefly. "Let's hear what's up." So we moved forward to rejoin the girl, who had already seated herself under the tree. She looked very attractive in her neat cuffs, tiny cap, and pink print gown as we approached her. "Why does she dress that way?" asked Kemper uneasily. "Economy. She desires to use up the habiliments of a service which there will be no necessity for her to re-enter if this expedition proves successful." "Oh. But, Smithy—" "What?" "Was it moral to bring a waitress?" "Perfectly," I replied sharply. "Science knows no sex." "I don't understand how a waitress can be scientific," he muttered, "and there seems to be no question about her possessing plenty of sex." "If that girl's conclusions are warranted," I interrupted coldly, "she is a most intelligent and clever person. I think they are warranted. If you don't, you may go home as soon as you like." I glanced at him. He was smiling at her with that strained politeness which alters the natural expression of men in the imminence of a conversation with a new and pretty woman. I often wonder what particular combination of facial muscles are brought into play when that politely receptive expression transforms the normal and masculine features into a fixed simper. When Kemper and I seated ourselves, I calmly cut short the small talk in which he was already indulging, and to which, I am sorry to say, my pretty waitress was beginning to respond. I had scarcely thought it of her, but that's neither here nor there, and I invited her to recapitulate the circumstances which had resulted in our present foregathering here on this strip of coral in the Atlantic Ocean. She did so very modestly and without embarrassment, stating the case and reviewing the evidence so clearly and so simply that I could see how every word she uttered was not only amazing but also convincing Kemper. When she had ended, he asked a few questions very seriously. "Granted," he said, "that the pituitary gland represents what we assume it represents, how much faith is to be placed in the testimony of a Seminole Indian?" "A Seminole Indian," she replied, "has seldom or never been known to lie. And where a whole tribe testify alike the truth of what they assert cannot be questioned." "How did you make them talk? They are a sullen, suspicious people, haughty, uncommunicative, seldom even replying to an ordinary question from a white man." "They consider me one of them." "Why?" he asked in surprise. "I'll tell you why. It came about through a mere accident. I was waitress at the hotel. It happened to be my afternoon off, So I went down to the Coquina dock to study.